Welcome to Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and me, Jim Cunningham.
Jim. Hello. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm doing well. We're in season 5, episode 12. That means this is episode 512. We are almost at the halfway point of season 5. Speaking of which, last time I mentioned if you had ideas about people to talk to in season 6 who don't make their living as magicians, but for whom magic is a big part of their life. Some people already wrote in some thoughts, which are very, very nice. I'll include the email thing in the show notes if you have any ideas for season 6, people who like Brent Morris, like Jeff Altman, like people who have had a big start in magic and then do something else in their lives, like Pat Hazel. And also, since last time, people have been subscribing to the YouTube channel, Behind the Page. Thank you for that. You're helping us reach our goal. I will put that link in there again. And also mention, if you didn't hear us last time, all of the Eli Marks audiobooks that are done, that are completed, that you can listen to. Yes, I'm looking at you, Jim Cunningham. All of them that are recorded are available on the YouTube channel to listen to, as are just about all the books from Albert's Bridge Books, including the Como Lake Players and many, many other things. So check that out and hit subscribe, and that'll help us get those things to other people. Anyway, here we are, 512. We're going to listen to chapter 12 as things heat up in Eli's world in London. But first, we're going to revisit a couple ideas from an early guest, Steve Cohen.
I love Steve Cohen. I love his show. You saw it. I saw it. If you haven't seen it and you are going anywhere near New York, you ought to see it. He is, he's moved from the Waldorf Astoria now, and he is at a new gorgeous hotel in New York. And it is so much fun and so magical. I can't recommend it highly enough. I don't know if I ever even told you this, John, but I, when I was going to be in New York for an extra night, I knew the show was going on, and I tried to buy a ticket, but was sold out. And I emailed them and said, hey, not knowing I was speaking with Steve Cohen, I just emailed what I assumed was the box office and said, I've only got one night in New York. I don't know when I'll be back. And I'm looking for one ticket. Is there a cancellation list or a waiting list? And I got a very nice email back, it turned out, from Steve Cohen saying, no problem. I'd love to have you. I'll open up a window and here's the link and you can buy a ticket. And it turned out it was Steve Cohen I was dealing with. And then I saw his show and cannot recommend it highly enough. It's a delight.
Yeah, it is. I will put a link in the show notes to his show. If you haven't had a chance, get out there and see that. One of the reasons we talked to Steve when we did talk to him was about his show, but also about his book on Max Malini. He's written, I think, what would be called the definitive work on that magician. And one of the areas we touched on, which was, I thought, really fun and fascinating, were the practical considerations of doing the famous Malini card stab, which is this. Do you bring your own table when you go to someone's house to do the Malini card stab?
It's a great question. So one of the great ideas that Johnny Thompson brought to the table was that, if you start stabbing people's tables, they can get angry, right? You go to someone's house and you leave a gashing mark in their table. They're never going to forgive you. So what Johnny Thompson brought to the table was using a wooden cutting board, like a kitchen cutting board you can find in a dollar store. This way you're stabbing into this surface that's meant to have blades impaled in it. And so that's what I've done before, is I've used a wooden cutting board. And if you're performing at someone's house, typically they'll have one, right? So you don't even have to prepare anything, much like Malini used to do. You would just do everything on the fly. So if you see a wooden cutting board in someone's house and you're ready to do this trick. Now, one of the legends of Max Malini was that he performed this trick at the home of an upper class person in Park Avenue. I've heard other instances of the same story, performing it at the St. Francis Hotel in San Francisco, another time in London at an upscale hotel. And he performed the blindfolded card stab into an antique table, like let's say a Louis XIV table. And these are beautifully designed antiques, really irreplaceable. And he left a gashing mark with his blade in the top surface of these beautiful antique tables. And the legend goes that the host of this party came up to Malini and said, "You, Mr. Malini, you've left a gashing mark in my table. You've destroyed it. What do I tell people in the future?" And Malini, in his gruff voice, said, "You can tell them that Max Malini made that mark." Right? So imagine the gall, the nerve it
Yes.
takes to destroy someone's antique property and then say, "Well, you could tell them that I made it. I made that mark. The mark
Wow.
was made by me." And yeah, in many cases, he's right, right? It's if someone's a legend, now you've added to the legend, and there's a physical proof of it that would be able to carry on that legend, give proof in the future.
Have you ever done a card stab routine?
I've never done a card stab, always wanted to do a card stab. Blindfolded card stab, I think, would be a terrific piece of magic for folks. And to be honest, it's one of the tricks. I'm working on a project for Christmas, a Dickens show. And Dickens, I don't know if you knew this, was an amateur magician,
I
and
did know that.
he always did magic at his Christmas parties. And so as I work on this show, I would like to do some magic, but finding a piece of magic that you could do as Charles Dickens that makes sense um, is harder than you might think.
So, like, iPhone tricks probably are out.
Yeah, those are out. But
Stealing the woman's bra,
yeah.
probably not going to do that. Bandana, banana.
Yeah, there's so many that they're just out of the running.
Yeah.
The other part that puts it out of the running is my lack of ability to do anything really difficult. But this is one that could work, and I have to do more research to find out if it could work for me.
And by research, we mean you're going to call Tyler and say, Tyler.
Well, I'll call Tyler, but I also bought a card stab video where many different magicians are talking about their version of card stab and how to do it. So I'm going to look at it to see, could I do this, or because there's only certain things I'm willing to do.
I understand.
Both of them require it to no skill required.
Well, I have to ask this. I know you've done the show once. You had one short run of it last year.
Well,
did you have any magic included in that version?
It was originally part of the pitch that there would be magic, but when we settled on the actually doing the show, the time frame didn't allow me to do that, and I just said I'm adjusting the budget and taking this out because we've agreed to do this, but I won't have time to add these flourishes to it. I can do the show, but not all things. But now we've agreed way upstream, so I will be adding some magic to it.
Well, I would love to see that show. And speaking of things that I love,
You're up first.
I'm up first. I'm going to go back in time. I'm going to go back about 50 years to recommend something that I love that falls under the I love that category that I would recommend people track down and watch if you haven't seen it. And Jim, you've probably seen it. I was reintroduced to it recently and was once again delighted by it. It is actually a little bit timeless, even though it takes place in the 70s in San Francisco. It doesn't feel old or that way at all. It is a classic screwball comedy format, taking off from screwball comedies of the 30s and 40s, and it's called What's Up, Doc?
No, sure.
It's with Barbara Streisand and Ryan O'Neal. Peter Bogdanovich directed it. Robert Benton was one of the writers on it. He recently passed away. And then the final script went to Buck Henry, who did a Buck Henry pass on it, which is maybe why it's so funny. It's about a musicologist at a convention in San Francisco with his fiancee, and he meets this woman who, in present day terms, stalks him until he finally admits that he's fallen in love with her and all. She happens to be a person for whom things happen around her all the time. I think the first time we see Barbara Streisand, she's crossing a street and behind her 2 cars crash and she doesn't notice it. She just brings chaos with her.
Hey, Steve! Steve, wait! Wait up, Steve! Oh! Oh, am I sorry? I'm terribly sorry. Let me sew it up for you. We'll go someplace quiet. We'll get a needle and thread in the drugstore.
I don't want to go into the drugstore. I don't like the drugstore.
Oh, don't be angry. Oh, listen, Steve.
The name is not Steve. It is Howard Bannister. And now that I've told you that, I just wish you'd forget you'd ever heard it.
I like Steve better anyway.
Obviously, you've mistaken me for someone else. Now just go away and leave me alone.
Why'd you follow me into the drugstore?
I didn't follow you into the drugstore. I had a headache.
Still have it?
No.
Howard.
See?
Howard, I said 5 minutes.
I'm sorry, Eunice.
Eunice. That's a person named Eunice.
Where have you been?
I had a little problem in the drugstore.
Steve, you didn't tell me you were married.
We're not married.
Congratulations.
But we will be soon.
Condolences.
Who is this person?
I haven't the vaguest idea. She was behind a rock in the drugstore.
Oh, come on, Steve. You can tell
Why
us.
is she calling you that name?
Don't pay any attention to her, Eunice. Look, Miss Max.
You know her name.
Eunice, I swear this is a bizarre joke.
Sure, it's easy for you everywhere you go. Another heartbroken women, women, women. You call it joking. Eunice and I, we call it lust.
Don't you know the meaning of propriety?
Propriety? Noun. Conformity to established standards of behavior or manner, suitability, rightness or justice. See etiquette.
And the nominal plot is that there are 4 identical plaid suitcases, one with the musicologist rocks, one with her clothes in it, one filled with jewels and one filled with government secrets. And it takes place mostly, at least for the first half, in a hotel in San Francisco. And then there's a very long chase scene. But the way that Buck Henry structured it so that the suitcases are moving around and you never quite know which one is where. And he has, before he died, he was quoted as saying, I mapped it out. It's absolutely correct. Every suitcase is where it's supposed to be. And I also believe that he said to Peter Bogdanovich when he wrote his version of the script, you have 3 suitcases. It won't work with 3 suitcases. It has to be 4. And so he added other characters in the suitcase. And it's just beautifully shot. Barbara Streisand at her most Barbara Streisand-esque. And if you don't like her, watch her in this movie because she's never been more charming than she is in this movie and fast talking and funny. Ryan O'Neal went to Cary Grant and said, how do I play this part? And Cary Grant taught him how to do it. And as you watch, you can see he's absolutely doing Cary Grant, not the voice, but the physicality of Cary Grant. And it has, I think, a murderer's row of character actors in it, from Liam Dunn to, it's the first feature film performance by Madeline Kahn, Austin Pendleton, Kenneth Mars is in it.
Buck Henry have a role in it other than?
He does not. He is not in it. He just did the final draft of it. It is just charming and funny and zips right along and is got one of the best chase scenes. The chase scene sort of mocks Bullet, which had been a few years earlier in San Francisco, but piling things on top of it in classic silent film sight gags. And it's all practical effects. It's all these cars doing these things. And, see it if only for Austin Pendleton and Kenneth Mars. Kenneth Mars doing I'm not even sure what sort of accent this is.
I'm your Simon.
Oh, how do you do?
You're upside down.
I know.
And I suppose you have not read my series of articles on the Versuch einer Anweisung in the Music Monthly?
I haven't. I'm terribly sorry.
Foolish of you. You must realize that it was that series of articles that helped me to become one of the 2 finalists in contention for the Larrabee Grant. Amazingly, you are the other one.
Oh.
I can't imagine that the Larrabee Foundation will throw good money away on a study of prehistoric rock
Oh, I think you're
tampings.
oversimplifying my thesis, Mr. Simon.
Oversimplifying? You accuse me of oversimplifying. I never oversimplify.
But he is just hysterical. In fact, we could do a whole night of Kenneth Mars. Let's watch Producers. Let's watch Young Frankenstein. Let's watch this and just see the wonderfulness of Kenneth Mars. Anyway, I love that this time. It's called What's Up, Doc? And it can be found just about anywhere.
I love Buck Henry. Buck, Mr. Pendleton, do the words "you're not being a good sport" mean anything to you? Henry he is so good and so funny in so many things. And I really did not know until I became friends with you that he did a lot of writing other than performing. But that was
Mostly known for writing. He wrote the Graduate screenplay. Anyway, yes, we could do a whole, we love that on Buck Henry because he was
good.
He's the hotel clerk in The Graduate. Are you here for an affair, sir?
I kind of forgotten that. Yeah, I love Buck Henry. Daddy can only go at home. Buck Henry from Saturday Night Live. He's a genius and sorely missed. We can't lose geniuses. We got to figure out a way to keep the
I
genius.
know. Anyway, we're getting off topic here. Do you have anything that you love this week besides all the things that you extrapolated out of what I loved?
Yes, and that's why I love this segment is because there's something I always learn from you on this segment. Well, you know that I am fascinated by World War II. We have talked about that on this podcast. As I mentioned in a previous episode, I enjoyed an 11-day Band of Brothers trip with some of my high school buddies. We all graduated from a military high school. And we took this trip, which, they take you from the beaches of Normandy to Hitler's Eagle's Nest, and you follow Easy Company and their route through the Second World War. And it was just so amazing to be standing where including in foxholes that they dug, that still exist overlooking the town of Foy or Foix, depending on what side of the border you want to stand on. But that's not what I love. Like so many things, I'm late to the party. I love the series Band of Brothers and can't recommend it highly enough. But like the West Wing podcast, there is a podcast about Band of Brothers, the series, and they walk through episode by episode, interviewing cast members, interviewing. I mean, and I have just tumbled to it, so I'm only a couple of episodes in, but so far I have heard Tom Hanks' long interview about how he came to the project.
We were shooting this at the turn of the millennium. We began working on all of this way back in the 1900s, as I like to say, which now seems like an awfully long time ago. And in fact, then it premiered at the time of 9/11, with the attacks on and destruction of the World Trade Center in the Pentagon.
So if you are like me, approaching the uh, certainly the clubhouse turn or the back nine of your life, and you're fascinated by World War II and the Band of Brothers, this Band of Brothers podcast, is terrific. And I'm hearing all kinds of things that I did not know or was unaware of until I tumbled to this podcast. So there's I love that. It's the Band of Brothers podcast, which coincidentally I'm finding on YouTube. So if you are going to listen to it on YouTube while you're there, I'll take this opportunity to say, click over and subscribe to us as well. But yeah, I'm really, really, really enjoying this sort of inside baseball of the making of that series.
When you go deep, you go deep.
I really do. I really, really do. You know me. I pick a subject and then I mine it until I can't find anything else to mine, and then suddenly there's a podcast, and I find that. So yeah, I really that series is incredible, and the tour that we took was incredible. Not the least of which was being in the places that they were in, but then talking to natives in like the beaches of Normandy or in the Normandy area, and how grateful they are to this day for what happened in that area in June of 44, and how they still uh, pay that debt forward. And most, all of those people are gone now. I don't think there's a single person left alive that stormed the beaches of Normandy at this point. But the natives of Normandy still are so incredibly grateful. And here I am, I wasn't alive when it happened, wasn't there. And yet, as an American, was welcomed with open arms by these people because of what our uncles and fathers and brothers did.
And in some cases, grandfathers.
In some cases, grandfather.
For our younger listeners, yes. Well, I will put links in the show notes to the podcast version and the YouTube podcast version so you can get up to date on that.
And also, put a link to just, I think it's on Netflix now. And it is really a good series.
Okay.
Really.
Check out the show notes there.
Yeah.
While you do that, we're going to continue reading. We're reading from The Linking Rings. Let's see. This is episode 512. So let me recap what happened the best I can from chapter 11. I think mostly took place in the club room where magicians are offering mentorship to beginning magicians. We get to see how good Hector is. We get a sense from the manager of the place, Gareth McKenzie, that he doesn't like how bossy Baxter is. Eli's helping out some young magicians, and Angelica comes in and helps as well, teaching some good magic. And then we got into the McHugh saying, if you don't want to slip, don't go to slippery places. And that took us right into chapter 12.
Chapter 12. I quickly learned McHugh had not turned up simply to act as my personal Jiminy Cricket during my encounter with Angelica, as indispensable as his presence might have been. He had come to talk to Harry and let him know the British police were ready to have their longer interview with him, and in McHugh's opinion, sooner would be better than later. "Look, I know you're anxious to head back home," McHugh told Harry once we tracked him down in the auditorium. He had finished his technical rehearsal and was packing his gear into its worn but solid traveling cases. "So the sooner you talk with them, the sooner they will no longer need to talk with you, as it were." "I'm still stunned by all of this," Harry said as he locked one of the cases. "First Oscar, then Boris. But of course, I will talk to them. When do they want to see me?" "Now," McHugh said, glancing down at his watch. "And I told them I'd be happy to act as your escort." This sudden change in plan required a quick call to Megan, who had intended to meet us for lunch at the Tate, which Harry had recommended for its fine view of the London skyline. When she was informed Harry and I were headed back to the police station, she was eager to join us there, but I suggested that some other activity, virtually any other activity, would prove to be a more interesting and worthwhile way to spend her afternoon. "Well, I can always spend some more time in the greenhouse. Plus, Roxanne did say something about shopping at some place called Neil's Yard," Megan said. She tried to sound like this option was a poor second to spending the afternoon in a dreary police station, but she wasn't quite pulling it off, so I tossed her the life preserver she needed. "I think I remember McHugh saying that was a great place," I lied. "Why don't you go check it out, and we can both go back there later if you think I'd like it." This plan was agreeable to her, so we decided to reconnect at dinner with the hopes of getting our romantic London getaway at least partly back on track. "What did I say was a great place?" McHugh asked as I pocketed my phone. "Neil's Yard, but I made that up so Megan wouldn't feel obligated to spend her afternoon waiting with us during Harry's interview," I explained. We had made our way down the vertiginous spiral staircase and headed out the Magic Circle's front door. "Oh, but she'll love Neil's Yard," McHugh said as we hit the street. "If she likes tea, there's a shop just down from Neil's Yard which I can recommend to her without hesitation. They offer a stunning selection of teas, and not just from India and the West Indies and China, but from locales where you never expect to find tea at all, let alone outstanding tea. But believe me," he was still telling me about the shop and its varieties of tea long after we'd flagged down a taxi and began our short ride to the police station. Somehow, Lawrence Baxter had gotten wind of Harry's impromptu police interview and had arranged for his solicitor, Simon Wexler Smith, to be waiting for us when we arrived. The large man was once again decked out nattily in a three-piece pinstripe suit. With his white walrus mustache, drooping eyes, and dense, silvery eyebrows, he looked the perfect cliché of a British attorney of a certain age. Harry waved off the need for an attorney to accompany him into the interview, clearly annoyed at the idea of needing any assistance. However, a few quiet but determined words from McHugh seemed to turn the tide, and a few minutes later, Harry and Wexler Smith started to make their way down a long hall. At the far end of the corridor, Harry turned and gave me a short, upbeat wave before he was swallowed into a distant conference room. McHugh and I settled ourselves into the lobby's hard plastic chairs. I checked my watch, forgot what it read, and immediately had to check it again. That was as good an indication of my current mental state as any. 2 murders and Harry as a key suspect was not what I had signed up for when I offered to accompany my uncle to London. I had been hoping for a nice week abroad with my girlfriend, and yet, once again, I found myself within the bowels of a police station. McHugh smiled over at me. "Don't get too concerned about the timing, my boy. Might take 10 minutes, might take 2 hours, he said. And we can't draw conclusions from either end of that spectrum. There are wheels within wheels. New evidence, old evidence, it all plays a role." "New evidence?" I said, pricking up at the notion. "Have you heard anything?" "I've heard many things. Barely a fraction of it useful," he said, folding the newspaper he had started to read. He looked up at the ceiling thoughtfully. "They've produced a more thorough forensics report on the unique chair that so effectively placed a knife in the back of your Mr. Cohen." "What did they learn?" "They learned how little they actually know, sad to say," he said. "They believe the device may have been oiled recently, but they also pointed out it could actually have been years. Not too helpful, that. They can't tell something as simple as a recent oiling? It seemed like a pretty straightforward deduction to me, but I realized I had no idea how you would actually determine such a thing. "Back in the day," McHugh said slowly, "I had occasion to escort a prisoner of some reputation to a dental appointment of all things. Not sure why, but I pulled the short straw, and there I was, cooling my heels while a bright young hygienist cleaned the devil's teeth. While in the course of her exam, she asked the fellow, as I gather she inquired of all her patients, just how long it had been since he had last given his teeth a thorough flossing." McHugh, who had been gazing across the room at nothing in particular while recounting this, turned to me. He was a bit of a smart aleck, this one, and so he turned the question back on her. "How long do you think it's been, love?" McHugh shook his head. "Poor thing. Bad enough she has to clean the teeth of this hooligan. Now she has to play Ask Me Another. She hemmed and hawed, finally saying she thought it might have been 6 months, perhaps at most a year. The fellow looked as ecstatic as a man serving a long and well-deserved sentence can look. He said, 'Wrong, ducky. It's been 27 years if it's been a day.'" McHugh punctuated this last sentence with a quick slap of his folded newspaper against his knee, shaking his head at the memory before opening the paper and returning to his reading. I waited a few moments, not sure if I had missed a key element of the story or perhaps suffered a quick bout of short-term amnesia. "So you were saying about the forensics and the chair and then flossing?" I offered tentatively. McHugh snapped back from his reading, once again folding the newspaper. "Yes, of course. The chair," he said quickly. "The point is, even the experts never really know about these things. That chair could have been sitting patiently for years and years, like a rusty mousetrap, just waiting for the right person to sit on it at the wrong time. The other point of interest," he said, turning toward me, "was what they discovered while going through Boris's effects. You know the zippered case he carried on his person? The one with his special blend of tea?" "I do," I said. remembering how Angus Bishop had chided him about it, and Boris's explanation that he needed to safeguard his tea because other magicians keep pinching from his stash while he was on stage. I saw him take a tea bag out of it the night he died. He offered me one as well. And a good thing you didn't accept the offer, McHugh said with a grim smile. Yes, well, as it turns out, he had 11 tea bags in the pouch when his body was found. The lab ran tests, and 5 of those tea bags tested positive for poison. I considered the implications of this. So it wasn't the water that was poisoned, it was the tea bag. Apparently. And whoever put the poisoned tea bags into his pouch could have made the switch at any time. It wasn't necessarily someone at Lawrence Baxter's house that night. Just so, McHugh said. It was a time-released murder, a trap, set to go off at some undetermined but deadly point. So, I'm hoping this new development will help to take some of the, I believe the word is, heat off of our Harry. That would be nice, I agreed. Regardless, though, don't you think the deaths of 2 magicians in just 3 days of each other is sort of an odd coincidence? McHugh shrugged. I believe it was G.K. Chesterton who called coincidences spiritual puns. That sounds suitably intellectual. Although, if pressed, I would have to confess I don't entirely understand what he meant. Of course, he also said the reason angels can fly is they take themselves lightly, which may be one of my favorite quotes of all time. Since he appeared to be in a relatively chatty mood, I put a question to him I had been pondering since tracking him down the previous Sunday night as he led his popular Jack the Ripper walk. How was it you and Harry met? I said. I mean, you've been friends for certainly as long as I can remember. Nearly as long as I can remember as well, he said, setting his newspaper on the empty chair beside him. It was years ago, of course. I was on the force and had just been promoted to detective inspector in the homicide division. Proud moment indeed. And one of the first cases I was assigned to was the death of Harry's friend, Archie Banks. I thought it was a suicide, I said, not understanding why this would involve the police, let alone someone from homicide. Anything outside of natural causes triggers a police investigation, McHugh explained. Strictly routine in this case, as there was a detailed suicide note and no evidence of any possible cause of death but suicide. And since the note went into some detail about Mr. Banks' dissatisfaction with his fellow magicians, Harry was one of the chaps I had to speak to. So you interviewed all these guys when they were younger? I found the idea fascinating, trying to picture this venerable group as young up-and-comers. I did indeed, McHugh said with a smile. Characters, one and all, Harry being one of the most remarkable. Our 30-minute interview turned into dinner and then an evening-long chat. What about? Well, he was fascinated with true crime at the time, McHugh said. He still is, I said, thinking of the hours Harry had spent in deep conversation with my ex-wife, an assistant district attorney, about her current and past cases. He was so ardent in his fascination, she often chided me for not being as interested in her day-to-day work as my uncle. I was never sure if she was kidding or not, which was an ongoing issue on many levels in our short but combustible union. And I've harbored a lifelong fascination with magic and magicians, McHugh continued. Just loved it, always have, dating back to listening to the Piddingtons on BBC. He looked at me, and my quick headshake told him I was in the dark on that one. They were a married couple who performed a mentalism act on the radio, he explained. Big stuff at the time, quite sensational. An amazing couple, the things they got away with. Stunning
It's amazing the tricks you can pull off as a double act. Anyway, I found what Harry did to be enthralling, and he felt the same way about police work, and we quickly became fast friends. And where does Jack the Ripper come into all this? McHugh laughed. As with most significant occurrences in one's life, unplanned and from out of nowhere. The short version is I was asked to speak on police procedures at a Jack the Ripper conference. I read some books before the presentation just to have a basic understanding of the case, and then, before I realized it, I found myself digging through files at Scotland Yard and working out my own perspective on all the clues, real and imagined. There is some fine work being done in that field by exceptionally bright people, but there is also considerable chaff mixed in with the high-end wheat. So I eventually wrote my own book to set the record straight, as it were, and I've traveled around the world with it ever since. Of course, I did more of that after Cora died, as she didn't care for traveling. More of a homebody was Cora. He grew silent for a moment, and I successfully resisted the urge to fill the silence. He then sighed and looked over at me with a sad smile. That was when I started the walking tour, which I did much more frequently back then, sometimes 5 nights a week. I guess it's safe to say I found immersing myself into the world of Victorian London more comfortable than my present-day reality. I nodded slowly. And now, with these murders, we have our own Jack the Ripper to deal with. McHugh shook his head and held up a hand. No, I don't think so. I believe all of Jack's victims were truly random crimes of opportunity, with the poor unfortunates in the wrong place at the wrong time. He glanced down the hall, and I followed his gaze. Harry and Wexler Smith were slowly making their way toward us. McHugh turned to me and finished his thought. These murders, if they are the work of a single person, are just as calculated and brutal, but they are also far more focused, and I think actually quite personal. With that, he got up and moved toward Harry and the solicitor. I considered what he'd said about the personal nature of the murders and wondered if that might be the key clue to crack open the whole affair. Then I got up and followed him, anxious to hear how the police interview had gone. Well, that was a complete waste of my time and theirs, Harry said, not for the first time in the past few minutes. We had said our goodbyes to McHugh at the police station, and, with Harry acting as navigator, we were deep within the London subway system on our way back to Lawrence Baxter's house in Hampstead Heath. So you said, I responded. McHugh said it was strictly routine. Strictly nonsensical, if you ask me, he said with a shake of his head. The same 5 questions as the last interview, just reworded and in a different order. This is us, he added as he got up and headed toward the doors of the subway car. The train was just pulling into Charing Cross Station, where, if I was understanding the quick itinerary Harry had spouted as we walked into the tube station, we would switch to the Northern Line. I couldn't quite get the geography right in my head, but Harry did it with ease. He moved smoothly from line to line and always knew which train we were looking for and which one not to step into. He had already kept me from walking into 2 different express trains in the few days we had been here. Since then, he'd kept a close eye on me as we bustled our way through the busy stations. Charing Cross, he said suddenly, as if surprised by where the train had landed us. We're so close it would be silly not to take a quick detour and drop in on Davenport's. Davenport's was a famed London magic store, much older than our magic store in Minneapolis, which was a relatively new kid on the block in comparison. Although I didn't know the particulars, My understanding was Davenports have been around since the Victorian era. As with everything else in London, Harry seemed to know exactly where it was, so I did my best to keep up with him as he zigged and zagged his way through the underground maze that was Charing Cross Station. Word on the street is they have a set of the linking rings used by Ching Ling Fu in the early 1900s. I've always wanted to take a peek at them. Talking about the magic props clearly excited Harry because the more he talked, the faster he walked. Is it wrong of me to say I've always found the linking rings, I don't know, I said, looking for the right word, sort of boring? This comment produced a raised eyebrow from Harry, but did nothing to break his stride. Wrong to say it? He repeated as we turned another corner. Charing Cross Station seemed to be structured like an octopus, with arms heading out in several directions. No, not wrong. You just have never seen it done right, apparently. When we get home, I'll show you a video of J. Marshall, simply a classic version. Tina Leonard has a lovely new take on the illusion, and Mike Caveney turned the whole routine on its head by using clothes hangers. He looked over at me and smiled, happy to be back in mentor mode. Eli, like a lot of supposedly boring magic tricks, if you can get it into the hands of the right people, it becomes new and amazing and a thing of beauty. We turned one more corner, and Harry let out a small yelp of victory. There it is, just where I left it, Harry said with a laugh. We passed several other small establishments in this bizarre, nearly deserted underground shopping mall, and then pushed open the glass door to Davenport's magic store. As we stepped inside, I realized that although I had spent the better part of my life in a magic store, I had actually been in remarkably few other magic stores. Consequently, the feeling as I entered Davenport's was an odd sense of déjà vu, where everything felt simultaneously familiar and completely foreign. It's like we have been transported into an alternate universe in which all the elements of our store had been shaken up and reassembled by a stranger. The store was smaller than our shop, but they had many of the same tricks, props, and posters we did. However, enough of the elements were different to make the overall effect a bit mind-boggling. Harry, of course, felt none of this and had immediately approached a clerk behind the counter. I understand you have a set of linking rings used by Ching Ling Fu, Harry said. Since we were in the neighborhood, I thought I would stop by and see if it was possible to take a look at them. This seemed to be news to the clerk, who was obscured from my view by Harry. After rephrasing his original question several times, it finally became clear the answer would be found with a higher authority, and so the manager was summoned. While this transpired, I busied myself looking at the products in the glass cases, more curious about how the merchandise had been laid out for presentation rather than what they were selling. For years, Harry and I had been waging a silent war in our shop. The skirmishes all involved the proper method for displaying magic tricks. Harry preferred, in my opinion, to jam the cases so full of products it became a jumbled mess. My preference was a more spare presentational style, which I felt helped to feature each illusion and make it stand out. In Harry's mind, this made it look like we didn't have any products to sell, and so he would quickly restock the display as soon as my back was turned. It was an ongoing and ultimately unwinnable battle, with both sides convinced they were fighting on the side of the angels. Soon the manager arrived, recognized Harry immediately, and quickly ushered him into the back room for a special viewing of the century-old metal ring set. As I moved my inspection from one display case to the next, I glanced up and realized I knew the clerk behind the counter. He saw me at the same time, and we both studied each other, briefly puzzled as to how we knew one another. You're Eli Marks. I met you the other night at the Magic Circle, he finally said, before I came to the exact same, albeit tardy, conclusion. That's right, and you are Lee, I said, taking a stab in the dark. I mentally acknowledged the irony of this phrase, as he had been the stagehand who had moved the deadly chair to center stage, but my first memory of him had been his dazzling display with cards. Liam, he corrected. Liam Sutherland. Yes, you were doing the thing with the cards, I finally said, not sure how to describe the acrobatics he had put the deck through. Cardistry, he said. Excuse me? Cardistry, he repeated. I'm a cardist. A cardist. I specialize in card flourishes, he explained. He picked up a deck of cards from the counter and quickly demonstrated a series of fans and one-handed cuts, essentially juggling the cards in the air in front of me. You've seen this sort of thing before, right? I have. I just didn't know it had a name beyond calling it card flourishing, I said, getting a little hypnotized as the cards danced in front of my eyes. Oh, it's the next big thing, mate, he said, as he concluded what I had to assume was a presentation which had taken him months or maybe even years to master. Is there a lot of call for that here? I asked, looking around the shop at all the traditional magic illusions on display. Sadly, not so much, he admitted as he slid the deck of cards back into its box. I spend my days demonstrating Svengali decks and self-working 3-card Monty routines to the tourist trade and geeky kids. You don't get to demonstrate anything other than cards? I asked, looking at all the fun options around the room. He shook his head, rolling his eyes at the other effects. I'm a card man, he said, with finality that seemed premature as he probably wasn't yet even 18. I don't bother with that other twaddle. Okay, card man, I said, glancing at the door to the back room and realizing it was likely Harry would not return for a while yet. Since I was in a rare competitive situation, I figured I should use the time constructively and pick up whatever selling tips I could. What's your favorite card trick to demonstrate? Oh, that's easy, he said, reaching into the display case for a deck of cards. Hands down, this is my favorite. It's a killer, a mind blower. Will it fool me badly? I asked, using a favorite phrase among magicians who are never merely fooled, but only fooled badly. He nodded in rabid agreement as he pulled the deck from its pack. Let me ask you this, mate, he said, and I recognized the practiced tone and cadence of the opening phrases of well-worn patter. I've always believed there is a real connection between cards and dogs. For example, he continued, looking up at me and clearly not recognizing the growing look of dismay on my face. Dogs travel in packs, and so do cards. Dogs do tricks, and so do cards. And there are those who say dogs pick their owners, and I believe the same is true of cards. So go ahead, pick a card, whichever card you'd like. He had spread the deck face up toward me, gesturing that I could pick from any of the visible cards for my selection. I gamely reached out and pulled a card from the spread. Liam then proceeded to perform my ambitious dog routine, virtually word for word, the way I had done it for years, long before I demonstrated it to Jake North at our 15th high school reunion. He showed me how I had picked the only blue card in a red back deck and then walked me through the sequence where the magician helps the spectator attempt to get the card to change back to its original color. When that didn't work, he revealed that because my card was the leader of the pack, the entire deck had instead changed color. From there, he took me through each of the other phases in my routine, finally concluding with the card doing its final trick. Like a dog, this card could roll over, revealing it was now the only reversed card in the deck. He looked up at me, waiting for the enthusiastic response he was sure was coming. That's Great, I said, trying to come up with the right words. Did you see that on TV the other night? I continued, trying to take all the stress out of my voice. I don't think I succeeded. I mean, you saw it on TV, right? Liam shook his head, puzzled either by my stammering questions or my complete lack of amazement at what was clearly a stunning card trick. No, never saw it on the telly, he said, trying to read my expression, which I guessed was an odd mix of rapidly changing emotions. Bloke taught it at a magic lecture a couple weeks back. Brilliant trick, dead simple to do. Been getting great reactions here in the store. I see, I said, trying for casual nonchalance in my efforts to extract information out of the kid. So someone taught it at a lecture. Who did he attribute the trick to, if you remember? I tried to make this last question sound offhand, but I don't think Liam was paying particularly close attention to my tone. He didn't credit anyone. The impression I got was it was his own trick. Really a nice piece of work. Let me see, I have his lecture notes here somewhere, Liam said as he turned and opened one of the drawers in a large cabinet behind him. He demonstrated it and sold it and the gimmick at the end of the lecture. You know how they do. I nodded because I did know that. I knew lecturing magicians often sold the tricks they demonstrated along with the gaffes and gimmicks that made the tricks work. So he sold the trick and the gimmick, I repeated, at this lecture. This trick he created. I have to tell you, he was just a so-so magician. But when I saw this trick, I knew I had to have it. We all did, he added as he turned around. He was sorting through a handful of brochures and pamphlets. Oh, here it is. He pulled one pamphlet out of the stack and tossed it in front of me. A smiling magician was pictured on the front. At the top of the cover were the words, lecture notes. Under the photo was the name of this so-so magician who was selling my trick as his own. The name was Jake North.
Well, there you go. That Jake. He's put out lecture notes for Jake routine that is not his, yet he has lecture notes on it. Oh, Jake. Oh, you're such a bad boy. This takes place in the Davenport's Charing Cross. I think it's closed. Hasn't the Charing Cross one closed? I don't know. At the time it was open.
It was there the last, 2 times ago. It was still there, but I don't know if it's still there now.
Yeah. I knew nothing about lecture notes before I started the Eli Marks series and didn't realize that it is a source of income for magicians and that stealing them like this would be almost literally taking money out of someone's pocket if you do that. So it's interesting that Jake has just apologized previously, and now we discover he apologized, but he didn't mention that he'd already sold lecture notes on it. So I don't know if Jake's going to survive this book or not.
Oh, my God.
I think he will. People like that don't die. But he certainly is proving to be a bad sport when it comes to being a magician. So we'll see what happens next time. Also, next time, we're going to be chatting with George Reese. I've mentioned George in the past. He's one of the people who reached out to me just telling me he liked the books, and we got a correspondence going, and I found out that not only did he get into magic at age 60, which is up there, but he also was and still is to some degree a forensic analysis. He analyzes video and photographs for both criminal and civil cases and is an expert witness.
Well, that's going to be great.
Yes, fascinating guy and a perfect example of, I think, what I mentioned last time that and people are starting to send me ideas. These are the people we want to talk to, the George Reeses of the world for whom magic was not the all-consuming thing in their life, but for whom it was a big part, but who also have other interesting occupations, such as our good friend, Dr. Reed Quinton, who, and other folks like him. Jeff Altman was fascinating. I just want to talk to those kinds of people. So there's a link in the show notes to email me if you have any ideas on that. Otherwise, next time, we're going to listen to Lucky Chapter 13 of Linking Rings and talk to George Reese. So we will see you then, folks.
This has been Behind the Page, the Eli Marks podcast, with your hosts, John Gaspard and Jim Cunningham. Produced by Albertsbridge Books at Grass Lake Studios. Find this podcast and all the books in the Eli Marks series at elimarksmysteries.com. That's ELIMARKS Mysteries.com. And thanks for listening.